Warning! The opinions on this podcast are of the hosts and guests only, and may contain childish humor. Listen at your own discretion. And now, please adjust your headphone volumes to an unreasonable level and prepare to enjoy the most dynamic and electrifying podcast that cyberspace has encountered.
Hello, our special guests. Welcome back to the show. This is episode 66 of Sports Bliss
with Rob
and Chris. How is everybody doing in the house? If you guys follow us on Instagram, you know that we started our giveaway on Wednesday. And if you still would like to enter while you are listening to this podcast, go to our Instagram at Sports Bliss with Rob and Chris and check out Wednesday's post. We are going to be giving away some items from our merch store. That's right, with some good sayings that you will only get or hear from our podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, I have two things I want to say. First, beer shout out. Yes, what are you drinking today?
I'm drinking a Florida Cracker.
A what?
I think it's a Florida Cracker from
I'm just kidding. That's good.
Cigar City, yeah.
That's a good. That's
a standard.
That's like an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah.
You can always rely on it.
Exactly.
Do you know what I'm drinking today? Don't cheat.
I don't know. Bard's?
No. I actually have a new beer.
What?
It is a new grist from Lakefront Brewery. It is a Pilsner gluten-free beer. Before we get into today's episode, if you guys are into conspiracies as much as we are, or as much as I am, and like to solve crimes and like to have your own partake in it, you need to check out To Hunt a Killer. We just bought our first box, and we are stuck on the Melancholy Killer. If you guys have tried this box, please let us know so we can get through to solving the case.
Yeah, we're stuck with, if you're doing it, you need a password at some point. We don't want to ruin it for anyone.
Yeah, no hints.
Yeah,
but
so
we are going to crack it because I know we're really close to solving this murder. Let's jump right on into today's episode. Okay, so we have a very special guest on our show today. His name is Ken. He is the Associate Director of Athletics at Southern Connecticut State University. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Very excited to join you today.
Yeah.
I'm excited too. This is going to be great.
Okay, so describe your school that you work at and the programs that you run.
Sure. Southern Connecticut State University is a member of NCAA Division II Northeast 10 Conference. We're located in New Haven, Connecticut. We are the only public university in our conference, comprised of a lot of private schools, all private schools, most notably Southern New Hampshire, which everyone I'm sure is SNHU, which everyone's aware of. Their huge online presence. I attended Southern New Hampshire University when it was New Hampshire College before they launched their online initiative. But other schools, Bentley, American International College, and University of New Haven in our conference. And we have 21 varsity teams at Southern Connecticut, and I'm charged with the athletic communications for all 21 of them and our 500 student athletes.
That's great. So, with all this recent COVID crisis and budget crunches and this, I came across a stat where 30 Division I programs have been cut already this year, and I think about 80 across all divisions. I'm sure this is a serious concern for you guys. Has this affected you guys yet, or do you think it's going to be a future issue?
It hasn't hit Southern Connecticut yet, and it hasn't really hit any schools in our conference. We're actually the largest Division II conference in the country. There's a lot of history behind the Northeast 10 Conference, a lot of very high-profile business schools. that have a rich history. So financially, they're in good standing. You see a lot of programs at the Division II level eliminating sports because, quite frankly, business isn't going too well for them.
Yeah, they
Right.
weren't doing well before this, probably.
Yeah. You know, the trend now across the board at every university, that the college landscape is diminishing. Fewer people are going to college now. You know,
Right.
you had that boom in the 90s and in the late 80s, the 90s and 2000s, where everybody had to go to college. And, you know, there was kind of a de-emphasis on trade and technical and more of go to college, and opportunities are there. And now it's trending the opposite way, that more people are self-starting, and they're more younger millionaire now and entrepreneurials than ever before. So there's a lot of schools that were in hot water before the pandemic hit, and now a lot of these cuts are reactionary and precautionary as to what could happen down the line. To be frank, you know, we look at budget items all the time, and seeing as we're a state university, we're tied into the state of Connecticut budget. So depending how much the state university system gets, it hits us. So right now, you know, our budget, we were told, where we were asking for an increase, like we do every year, like every athletic department in the country.
Mm-hmm.
We were told to hold pat, basically, and you know, we're probably, at least on the inside, you know, bracing and preparing for cuts. I could tell you though, I could tell you with dead certainty, 100%, that was a tough decision for all of those athletic departments.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
You never want to eliminate opportunities for student athletes. You always want to add, and you always want to expand. So, you know, I know there are a lot of, you know, the reaction to that is a lot of anger, and, you know, they get at the athletic director and board of directors, and those are decisions that keep people up at nights. That's just tough. I've been on that end. Before I came to Southern Connecticut, I was at Quinnipiac, and they chose to eliminate a few sports there, and it actually set off a pretty high-profile Title IX case.
Yeah, you know,
Wow.
I actually saw some stuff about that, how this is going to affect Title IX. And for, I guess, the listeners out there that don't know much about it, with Title IX, the way I understand it, and you can correct me, you have to have not only a proportional amount of resources for female to male, but also to the admissions percentage of females to the college. So they're worried about decreasing admissions going, but by eliminating, some programs eliminate the women's program, and then they balance it with the men's program because they have football, they have so many more scholarships in that some people are worried that this is going to decrease admissions for not athletes, but just regular students that are women.
Yeah, the misconception there, and it's because of the perception of, you know, where Title IX is publicized the most is it's in athletics, but it can strike a campus across the board, you know, and it's a measure for equality, and to assure that, you know, make sure everyone is treated the same, and everyone, you know, is getting the same resources. And, you know, historically, it was a reaction to football. You know, you look at schools like Notre Dame and Michigan and Florida, where those are national brands. You know,
Right.
Florida Gators are a national brand. They always have been. They always will be. Notre Dame is an entity in itself. They're bigger than a lot of NFL teams, realistically. And you know, the problem there was the people fighting for rights of other athletes. Title IX is an important thing, just a very important thing to make sure that, you know, the checks and balances, to make sure that everything's going the right way within the athletic department for all of its student athletes. And that's the goal of every athletic department now.
So with cuts, with you guys preparing for cuts, how do you think this is going to affect the morale of all of the student athletes?
Well, right now there's a lot of uncertainty with our student athletes, and a lot of that uncertainty comes with, we can't give them an answer yet.
Right.
You know, the question right now, well, honestly, we'll start at the beginning of the pandemic. Our conference put on hold and then canceled seasons within 30 seconds. Honestly, it was, we got off a call and then got a call not even a minute later and said, never mind, let's just bag the whole thing.
Wow.
And you know, it's a very light way of saying it, but it was devastating to a lot of student athletes. You know, the reaction right there was our senior athletes saying, I've worked so hard my entire life, there's nothing for me after today. and it's not fair.
No,
Terrible.
definitely.
It's terrible.
Definitely.
I have a right to go out my last season.
Right.
So that was the initial reaction right there. And the NCAA did the right thing and granted, this blanket waiver for people to qualify for and get their one season back. And, a lot of students took advantage of that. Some of them just graduated and moved on. And now we're looking at that now where we're having those conversations with student athletes now who are saying, well, now you're talking about the fall not being
Right. What's going to happen?
being held. What happens to my fall season now?
Right.
What happens to my senior? It's the same conversation we were having before. And I'll be honest with you, we had a very contested administrative call yesterday with our coaches, where some coaches got very emotional, and the meeting got a lot more animated than our administration thought it would, because they want the answer that we don't even have.
Right.
And it finally came down to, hey guys, turn on the news. Like,
Exactly.
Has any idea what's happening right now?
It's all up in the air.
Yeah, in Connecticut, and I know Florida, you guys were ahead of us. We just started reopening yesterday.
Yeah.
You guys reopened within the last couple of weeks, correct?
Yeah.
I would say about a month now.
Yeah, it's been almost a month.
Almost a month. We've been pretty much open everywhere.
Almost fully open now.
Yeah, and there's been a tremendous spike here in Florida.
Yeah.
But they're testing people like crazy too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of the people are really asymptomatic that are positive, So hopefully it's going the right direction, and we'll continue on.
So when we're looking at the fall, we look at what we can do on our campus, and the school has been unbelievable. The school and all the administration has been planning to get people back on campus. We have a date, August 24th, where we're going to get kids back on campus. We're talking about preseason now, and it's a realistic conversation. Next week, 2 weeks from now, that may be a completely different conversation based on what happens here.
Oh, yeah.
But on the other side of that, we compete against teams in New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Vermont, all the schools around New England. And some of them don't have the same protocols in place as Connecticut does.
Yeah.
Right.
So our football team may be ready to go, but if we have to go up to Bentley in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts isn't allowing football, that game's coming off our schedule. I mean, we face 5 teams in Massachusetts. That's going to knock out half our football schedule right there.
Yeah,
Wow.
that should be interesting to see. Like, yeah, you said everything could be good on your end, but if the other opposing team that you're playing is not ready, I mean, there's nothing you can do.
Right.
I know there's a big push from, I follow UCF, so I followed American Athletic a lot. And they're talking about doing, actually, I don't want to take credit for this, but there's a local broadcaster here that has been preaching for years and years to have regional games, maybe not in football, but like the Olympic sports and even baseball. He's like, Florida's great with baseball. Why do we have to travel to Wichita to play or to Texas to play when we can play all these great teams here? And really, the American has embraced that. And I think other conferences are starting to say that too, that they can save a ton of money, by playing teams within the same state, which will be interesting. And I think they said they're going to try to start it if teams want to do it, not this season, but the following.
Yeah, that's something, that's one of the models that's been proposed, not only at the, I know it's been proposed at the NCAA level, and believe me, there's been 2 dozen proposals that have come out from the NCAA to general membership that are just some crazy ideas, some more realistic than others. But one of those things are regionalization. So in our area, and I know your fan base is probably tied into the Big Five and everything, but it translates to that as well. When you talk about regionalization, we have 3 Division II conferences in New England, and we're trying to pair up teams. At one point, we were trying to pair up teams to try to make one big conference based more geographically,
right,
and based on conference alignment to spit out something at the end of the day.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
It's a really interesting time. I mean, small picture, you can look at it and say, you're not going to travel outside your state to compete, and that does what it does to your schedule. Big picture, this could mean gross changes to the NCAA makeup and how games are played and conferences are decided, regional makeups are put together.
Right.
It's apples and oranges when you're talking Division II and Division I, and I've worked at both levels,
right,
very high level. So I mean, I see the difference in that. You know, regional competition is a little more important in Division II than it is in Division One.
Yeah.
You know, quality wins in Division One count more than quality wins in Division Two. So if we go down in Florida and beat a Division II team there, it doesn't count as much as if we beat University of New Haven down the street from us.
Right.
Right.
Figuring the regional picture.
Yeah.
Division One, that's another story.
Yeah.
You know, Florida gets on a plane and goes and beats Vanderbilt. You know, that's gonna be a bigger a win for them. But I mean, you know, I remember as recently as 5 years ago that those big five were talking about branching off and going off and doing their own thing.
Yeah, there's still talk about that. They, you know,
I think there's something to it, and this may be what they need to get it done. Because if you look at football, I know you guys are big football fans. You're not going to convince me at all. If the NFL steps on the field, the SEC is stepping on the field. It's going to happen.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
100%.
But that may not mean the same for the American.
Yeah.
It may not mean the same for the Patriot League. It may not mean the same for Division II.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's going to be really interesting for sure.
When you talk, I remember I was traveling with a team several years back with Quinnipiac, and we went out to Michigan. We showed up at Michigan football game day. We were playing on Sunday. We went to the football game on Saturday, and I had my business specs on. You know, I always go and try to learn every place that I go to, Notre Dame, Michigan, any of these places, just see what they do, because I'm going to steal their ideas and use it because they're doing it better than I am. But just the sheer magnitude of like the money potential that comes in on a big college football game day.
Oh, yeah.
It's jaw-dropping.
I mean,
It was incredible.
It's interesting because when I went to UCF, I had a student job, of course, right? And I worked in the president's office back then. And this is when UCF was making the transition from 1AA to 1 at that point. And I would see these donors and the way it happened on game day. I mean, that was one of my responsibilities sometimes, was driving the donors and take them to different things. And it's pretty amazing. And a lot of people underestimate that. And that's the reason a lot of these schools want fans in the stand. It's not for the guy paying the ticket general admission. They want all these donors and all these people that give big checks every year, especially for the big schools.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, a major college football game day, just never mind even get into corporate sponsorships and luxury box sales and those VIPs you're talking about. I mean, some of these places are bringing in tens of $1 million a weekend.
Yeah.
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 You can't. I understand why Clemson would turn around, why Stanford could turn around, or one of these big, one of the big five can turn around and say, if we don't have football, we're not going to have softball and baseball in the spring.
Oh yeah.
It's sad, but it's eye opening. It's hard to compete at a very high level without funding.
It is. Since we were talking about NCAA a little bit, we've been talking about the name, image, likeness also. And I'm just curious, is that going to have an effect on you guys? Because I'm kind of a nerd a little bit, and I read the NCAA reports and the meetings and all this. It seems like there's a growing trend of, just if you read between the lines, the Power Five are kind of trying to block it in a way. They're putting a lot of restrictions on it, is what it looks like. And that really, I don't think it's going to favor the athletes at the end of the day, and especially ones outside of football.
So I had an interesting perspective on this. We have an individual. You guys will recognize his name as soon as I say it. Scott Burrell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is
with the Bulls.
Who's been thrown back into the spotlight now that due to the Last Dance. Scott Burrell is from Hamden, Connecticut, which is right next to Southern Connecticut. It borders New Haven, and he's our head basketball coach over at Southern Connecticut. So I sat down with him one day when they started talking about the name and image likeness, and I said, "What do you think about this?" And he says, "You know what nobody is talking about? How this affects the teammate culture in the locker room."
Right.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And he goes, "Think about this." He goes, "There's a guy. He's an all-conference point guard, and he's not getting the same money or compensation that somebody else in the room is getting. Guess who's not going to get that ball passed to him the 10 or 12 times that he needs to put the points up there?"
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's crazy because, you see that at the pro level. That's what happens at the pro level.
Definitely.
There's that animosity, that jealousy that says, hey, if I take those shots instead of that guy, I'm going to get the sneaker contract. and you have to worry about what door that's going to open for major college sports. I think at the Big Five level, there's probably some concern that the college may lose some of those dollars to the kids on their own teams.
Right.
Yeah, I think the University of North Carolina, I think that was the athletic director. They were interviewing him about it, and he kind of let it slip at one point, and he was like, well, if we let this happen, this is paraphrasing, of course, if we let this happen, then these companies are going to contract directly with the players. Why do they need us?
Yeah.
I mean, especially for basketball, why do you need to give the team money if you can give the 3-star players money?
Yeah, I mean, how many basketball arenas do you go to and you see that giant swoosh on the court?
Oh yeah, everybody
decaled on the court. That disappears. Why would they give $10 million to Michigan? I keep throwing Michigan out here, Notre Dame. They're obviously on the top of my head. But
oh yeah, it's okay.
Disappears from the basketball
big
court in
brands.
Michigan, and it's going to go on the starting point guard's chest, or he's going to be getting the ads and the money for that.
Yeah.
Why spend $10 million on that? We can throw $500,000 to a kid and get the same coverage.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about this when some of the suggested rules were coming out, and I was saying to Christy, I was like, they should just make an independent entity and just be like a broker, and it shouldn't go through the schools. So then kids can apply for a position if they want to rep Nike on their
Just
Instagram. Let them
like
do
having
it.
a job, basically.
But then basically that is going to be more transparent, because if you start filtering through schools, we know it's going to be used for recruiting and different things, and it's going to get just as corrupt as it is now. I mean,
it more so.
Yeah.
more corrupt, probably.
It's just so messy, and they're in a really bad situation right now. I think they're way over in their head.
And
right
I think kids are going to start transferring for sponsorships in a way,
Yeah.
because they're going to go to one school and they're going to want to be offered something. They're going to say, no, you can't have this. This goes against what the school wants. I use the car dealership analogy. When we go to the football game here, there's a huge Chevy thing there, right? And do you think if Ford wants to sponsor some kid, that sponsor's going to be very happy with the school? I mean,
yeah, no, you're right.
It's going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, how long does it take to get into like that 5-star recruit's ear? Don't go to Kentucky. Why don't you come to St. John's? We're right down the street from Madison Avenue. These are where the opportunities.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I mean, it's realistic. It's a very slippery slope, and people with far more experience than me have been banging away at this for years. I mean, name and image likeness has been going on for forever, really, and people have been testing how far they can go, because that's human nature.
Right.
Yeah.
But I remember name and image likeness coming up. My first, look at it was probably about a month into the job at Quinnipiac, when, EA Sports was contacting me about players' names to use on their college basketball program.
And this all kind of stemmed from Ed O'Bannon, right? With UCLA,
Yep.
He was the one who sued, and
yeah, I mean, he was really the first one.
He was the
to
first
get
one,
out
right?
there and get in front of it, and look how long that's been going on. That's over 10 years.
yeah. And
It's gonna be interesting. It could very easily put this in place and get rid of it very quickly. It's one of those things where I think there's just a lot of uncertainty about it, and I'm honestly surprised, because I think there's more cons than pros to this approach. I'm kind of surprised it really got pushed through, but it's reality, and it's where it is. And the NCAA puts out this look that they're looking out for the student athletes and do a great job for that, but that autonomous 5.
Yeah, exactly.
They're obviously pushing. They have a little more weight behind their push than anybody else.
And they're trying to go over the NCAA and lobby Congress directly. So
yeah, and that's not an indictment on the NCAA or anything.
No.
I'm not
but
putting anything on that.
but they want to get what they want to the Power 5.
Sure.
I saw this other story that kind of dovetails into this basketball player from Oregon, and I forget her name off the top of the head now, but she's suing the NCAA for name, image, likeness, basically. And the real reason she's suing is, I forget which school she was at. She was at one school, and she transferred. She played for the women's national team and broke her leg, and she ended up having all these surgeries and complications from it, and she has $20,000-$30,000 in medical bills. Now that she's transferred to Oregon, her old school can't help pay for that, And she's
Right.
stuck with that now. And she's like, well, why can't I make some money to pay for this, essentially?
Yeah, that's it's a big point. It's a big focus, and when you get the medical issue, when you get into paying student athletes and name and image stuff, there's always some administrator, and most administrators go, we need to figure out insurance first. We need to
Mhm.
make sure that every kid is healthy. When you look at the components that put together that make up the NCAA, you have academics and you have well-being, one and two. Let's make sure that they're keeping to their studies under the the principles of the NCAA. Let's make sure that we're making that they're safe, that they're healthy, that they get on the court, and all that. And for that not to be more of a focus of the NCAA and in the Big Five, for the simple reason that it's leaving them exposed for these purposes, for these reasons, it is really kind of shocking. And they've done a better job of that over the last 5 or 10 years, than they ever were. But getting the kids healthy and keeping them healthy, a situation like you just said is a great example of that.
Because if I'm wrong, I'm not sure if I'm right with this, but I think once the kids graduate and they're gone, then it's their responsibility at that point, right?
Right.
Because you'll commonly see guys, even at big schools, they'll sit out their bowl game because there was a guy for UCF 2 years ago. He set out a lineman, and he was their starting lineman. He set out because he needed back surgery. And if he didn't have surgery at that time,
Right.
he wasn't going to be able to get surgery. I mean,
Right.
he was stuck. It's just,
Yeah,
it's kind of sad. And I know a lot of players have asked, maybe some of this money should be redirected that the colleges are making, or TV money and this sort of stuff, to put in some type of general fund to cover, complications or whatever from sports kind of lifelong, instead of just while they're in school.
It's surprising. A lot of the things that never come out, the really great positive things that the NCAA does, there are things similar to what you just mentioned.
Uh-huh.
There are things in place now to help student athletes who need it. You just kind of have to hunt it out and ask for it. There are benefits available to student athletes through grants, to support them in their needs. A lot of the times, a lot of schools do take care of these things.
Mhm.
They do the right thing, and they take care of their student athletes. But you get in those situations where they just don't. They just flat out don't, for whatever they do. They don't want to set a precedent. Then they're paying for everybody's back.
Right. Then everybody's complaining of everything
Right.
and wants to get it taken care of.
Right. So
Interesting.
there are plenty of opportunities out there for student athletes to find that money and find the support that they need. The NCAA, is very supportive, and there is a lot of open-mindedness about definite certain situations. And I think for overall they do a very positive job in supporting their student athletes.
So before we wrap up this episode, we always end with a would you rather question. So I wanted to add Ken to the mix too. So this is for both of you guys, okay? Okay. Would you rather tank a season to get the top overall draft pick, or just miss the playoffs and get a mid-round pick?
Oh man.
I don't know.
Are we,
I
wait.
play
We're going to qualify this. Are we talking, are we talking football, or are we talking basketball?
Well, I was thinking football, but I guess you could
No, because it makes a difference for me.
Okay, let's just say football.
Okay, football. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Ken. So if you, I would say my personal preference on this would be, I can't tank.
Because you don't
I
like
just
to
can't
lose.
do it. I think it's okay, from a business standpoint, I think it's too risky, right? If you tank, then if that happens for too long, if it happens for 1 year, maybe the fans stay. Maybe you can sign free agents and dump all your contracts and then re-sign and that. But how often is one player, unless it's probably a quarterback, going to change your team that much? You know what I mean? You need so many people for football that I don't think it's good. I think if you're building up and you're almost making the playoffs, you can still find good players and sign free agents. So I think I would go for missing the playoffs.
Okay. All right.
I don't believe in tanking. I hate tanking.
Yeah.
You go out there and play to win, and professional sports aspect, like for the fans' sake, put your players on the field.
Yeah.
Especially in the NFL, like the chances of an average 10-year-old kid going to an NFL game regularly, you know, like they're going to miss an opportunity to see somebody else. I have a good story about that, actually. I grew up a Boston Celtics fan. The last year the Boston Garden was open, my father said, pick a game. I was a huge NBA fan, and I picked the Dallas Mavericks. Out of all the teams that were coming in to play the Celtics, I picked the losing team there because they had Jason Kidd and Jimmy Jackson.
Oh, yeah, it was a great team. Yeah.
And those three guys were exciting to watch. Jason Kidd was exciting. They had a great core right there.
Yeah.
We go to the Boston Garden. My father had great seats. My father worked 3 jobs to put me through college. I think it was my sophomore year in high school. You know what I mean? It was a lot to get that money together. And we go to the game, and I was there as much to see those 3 guys as I was to see Reggie Lewis and whoever was D Brown and those guys on that team. You guys probably have no idea what I'm talking about.
No, I know them all. Yeah, I'm a huge basketball fan. And I know all those guys. The pump with the shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And we get there, and those 3 guys sat out the game because their season was basically over, and they were injured, and they were just going to sit out the rest of the season. That was their day off. It was a Sunday game.
Oh, wow.
And they just decided not to play that day. And it's such a small little thing right there. I remember going to Yankee Stadium and Mattingly sat out a game. It was like the one game a month he sat out, and I was devastated because I didn't get to see him play that one time we went every year. So I say put your players on the field, play the game the way it's supposed to be played, and give the fans what they're looking for. They're your fans. They support you. You wouldn't be there if they didn't buy your tickets.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
I agree with you guys. I don't think, as much as I want to think that one player can make the difference on a team, I feel like it's multiple players. So, and I'm just not a loser by heart. I can't lose.
I like that.
Yeah, I can't do it. I mean, I can't do it. Can't do it.
Oh, this is my pleasure. Really, thanks for having me on, and I hope I gave your listeners some good things to think about, and I was helpful to you guys.
Oh, definitely.
This is great. Thank you very
It was
much.
great. Do you want to say anything about Southern Connecticut? Any contact or anything people should follow or anything?
Yeah, SCSUowls.com or SCSU_owls on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a look. We're trying to do some things there, and we're dedicated to the student-athlete experience, right? We're at the core principles of the NCAA. We're supporting our student-athletes and trying to make an impactful experience for them.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up today. Ken, thank you so much for being a guest on our show, and we will catch you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to Sports Bliss with Rob and Chris. Available on Anchor.fm, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and everywhere else fine podcasts are found. Follow us on Instagram and leave voice comments at 407-494-6420. This has been a Sports Bliss with Rob and Chris production.